All right, welcome back. So if we keep on going, we've looked at rearranging equations that way, dealing with that denominator. Let's just have a look at what happens if we've got square roots happening and squares happening. So we need to be careful as always, and we're just undoing what has already been done. So if I have a look at an example for you, let's say we've got y equals the square root of x minus 1. Okay, that whole thing is under the square root sign, and we have been told to make x the subject of this equation. All right, sounds easy enough. This whole thing, so square root signs are like brackets, okay? They're all nestled in there. It's like a little basket or a little box. They belong together. You can't go trying to take bits out of a square root sign. Okay, you need to deal with the whole thing at once. And of course, to undo the square root, we need to square both sides. So let's do that. Okay, so squaring both sides, we're going to end up undoing that square root on the right-hand side. And we end up with that. And now we can add 1 to both sides. And we end up with x being y squared plus 1. Okay, so that doesn't seem too bad, does it? All right, let's have a look at another example, though. What about, let's do this one in blue. Let's say we had y equals the square root of x minus 1 plus 2. Let's say we had that. So now we have to be careful, don't we? We can't go trying to do the square of the right-hand side yet, okay? Because if we do that, we'll be squaring everything on that right-hand side. Okay, so if we're adding 3 or whatever to both sides, that's cool. We chuck it on the end to both sides. If we're timesing sides by 5, for example, then again we make sure we do that to the whole of each side. Okay, and that's where one thing that we have to do be quite careful about. We make sure the whole of the right hand side gets multiplied by 2. So an example, let's say I had y plus 2 equals x over 5. So if I had something like that and I wanted to multiply by 5 to get rid of that 5, I need to make sure that I times that whole left-hand side by 5. Okay, so just emphasizing that what we're doing to the whole side. So same deal with the squaring or square rooting. Okay, same thing. So here, if we try and go and squaring that right-hand side, we've got to make sure that we're noticing that we're actually squaring that whole expression, that whole thing, x minus 1 plus 2. That whole thing would be being squared. It would not become x minus 1 plus 4, because 4 being 2 squared. It would not be that, because that is not the same. They are not equal. It's not the same as that thing there. You end up with actually that times that, wouldn't you? Which is a little bit yuck and a little bit complicated. But in saying that, it's kind of like if I had turned that square root of x minus 1, if I actually just called it something like p, we know that if I square an expression like p plus 2, I'm going to end up with p squared plus, what would it be, 4p plus 4, okay, because we're adding in the middle and timesing at the end. We know that it would turn into that expression. So really, it would just be this whole thing squared plus, and in this case, if it's this example, it was 2 plus 4 lots of that plus 4. Okay, if it was a 1, you're going to have 2 lots of this thing in the middle and a 1 on the end, wouldn't you? Because you're timesing the 1 and the 1. So, it's not really too bad, but it's nice to avoid that if you can. Okay, so instead, let's deal with that minus 2. Okay, again, because you're thinking about BEDMAS, he's all tied up with the minus 1 under that square root sign right now, so we don't want to go trying to square it. Okay, let's get rid of that minus 2, that plus 2, by minusing 2. Okay, so instead, let's minus 2 from both sides. Scroll up there. Okay, so let's do that. We end up with y minus 2 on our left-hand side, and we've still got the square root of x minus 1. Notice sometimes I do this little flick on the end of my square root sign. I'm just emphasizing that it stops there, okay? Because sometimes when people write long expressions, say if you had the square root of x minus 1 plus 3 plus 5, in that example, I can't tell if the x minus 1 is under the square root sign or if it's just the x, or if I did it to there. It's like, oh yeah, I think it's the x minus 1, but then what if I made it a little bit extra long? Does it include the plus 3 or not? So anyway, I often do that little flick. Do want to make that clear. Okay, so now we can do the square of both sides. So now you can do square, okay, and now we can get rid of that minus 1 by adding 1 to both sides. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. If we then wanted to expand out that left-hand side, you certainly could, because of course we've got y minus 2 times y minus 2, always remembering that it's not just y squared minus 4. And so we'd end up with y squared minus 4y plus 4 plus 1 equals x. So we've got y squared minus 4y plus 5. Okay. All right. Anyway, so we just got to take care. Okay. Same deal if you've got some squares going on and you want to do a square root of them. And I'm sure I've got an example on here. So let's say I had y plus 1 equals x minus 3 squared. Okay, same deal, all tied up with the brackets. We want to undo that squaring, so we're going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, so we end up with the square root of y plus 1 equals x minus 3. Okay, and so we're left with that plus 3 equals x. Okay, so yeah, just emphasizing that. Now, I just wanted to check